the things I always hate with those mixed champs.
Deadwood. I'm sorry. I completely botched this whole thing.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We can keep all this in. It's fine. Mistakes are chef's kiss. Welcome on the Deadwoodjedi, and I have a very special treat. Even though we have a bunch of new champions coming in the game, I said, why go over the kits by myself? Let's bring on Smiley here so that we can talk about them together and maybe offer a little insight on how we would build these champions and where we would use them. But we're not just going to do that, because even though we're going to talk about the champions right now, give you a kind of brief overview and, quick guidance, best advice on how to use them, we are going to go over to Smiley's channel and we're going to break down Herofont Lazarus, I think one of the coolest looking new champions in this game, mythical champion. And Smiley and me are going to break down, test him out and see what he's like, and kind of get a more deep dive on it. But Smiley, brother, thank you for being here. Thanks for coming on and hanging out. And should we you ready to dive right into this thing?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right, perfect. Well, without further ado, we've got Herofont Lazarus. Now, this is obviously one of those mythical champions, so we got multiple skills, multiple forms, and I think they both look pretty darn cool, if I do say so myself. He's actually, I think, one of the coolest looking champions. Like, this is the reason why we're doing this, is I looked at this guy, I was like, oh my god, he's cool. Smiley, what do you think?
Looks really, really awesome. He reminds me, in this form, he reminds me of a lot of, or the second form, rather, he reminds me a lot of Ramontu, doesn't he?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's definitely some similarities there as far as like how they are supposed to look. Let's see. Do I have Ramontu there, I guess? Yeah, they're almost exactly. Yeah, they're the same. The same. There you go. But he's got more color, he's got a little, he's got that Jurassic Park,
That's true.
gray frill going on there with him. But yeah, let's talk about his kit a little bit. Let's kind of give a brief overview of what this guy does. He's got a speed aura, 25% all battles, which is always amazing to have. A1 shield on somebody. Shield's proportional to his attack, which could be pretty big. I haven't tested it, obviously. That's the other thing. I haven't tested these champions. I've just looked at them. Smiley's done a brief amount of damage testing, but we're gonna go on his channel, like I said, break this guy down so you get a better idea of what he's like. But he's got a block debuff ability that he puts on all allies for 2 turns and decreases duration of all buffs on enemies. So that's kind of nice. It's almost like a buff strip and block debuff, and he places block buffs on enemies. So definitely like a Hydra kind of thing, but I think that would be really good for Arena as well. Fills turn meter with his A3. Decreases turn meter for the enemy, fills turn meter for us, gives us increased attack and strength and buff on all allies. So he's kind of like a Arbiter and Lysandra blend there with that ability, which I think is pretty nasty. Obviously A4, he transforms. His passive gives a perfect veil and increased accuracy buff at the start of his turn, not the round, his turn, which is kind of amazing. And he gets less damage for every 750 attack they have, stacks up to 30%. So he's got some nice passive damage reduction just based off the level of his attack. And at the end of his turn, he revives an ally with 50% HP and 50% turn meter. Also places a perfect veil buff on the revived ally for 2 turns. This is every 3 turns. So this is an active effect of this, right? So I assume you'd have to use that as a skill to revive someone, but he has a revive every 3 turns, which is cool. I'm assuming actually that passive probably activates every 3 turns as well. But yeah, it's nice. It's a passive, so that's always a great thing to be able to start off with. So yeah, I don't know. Form 1, pretty cool. Let's do a quick Form 2. Each hit increases his attack, which is pretty awesome, and the second hit decreases the attack of or defense of the enemy or the max HP. It all depends on the type. It's interesting this doesn't work against support types. I thought that was kind of cool. It's the first time I've seen that. You don't see that in this game. There's not a lot of things that have to do with the actual type of champion, and that's kind of a neat little thing if they start breaking into that. A2 attacks all enemy, ignores shields and defense, and before attacking removes all debuffs. So it gives himself a full cleanse, and then increases the attack damage by 15% for every debuff. So it could be a really fun Gerp Tuck combination right there, right? You debuff him so that he can do more damage. And if no debuffs are removed, Increases attack damage by 15% for each ally alive instead. Again, Hydra sounds really fun. Could potentially do a lot of damage with that, I think. And then A3, ally protection, strength and shield buff. He ignores all of that and 30% of the target's defense. And before attacking, steals turn meter. It can't be resisted. Kind of a cool ability. It is passive on this form. Increase attack, increase crit damage. Active increases the cooldown of enemy skills by 2 turns whenever he kills an enemy. And if this champion kills 2 or more enemies in a single attack, this effect will only activate once. Effect cannot be resisted. This is interesting. That's an active effect. I just assume that means it's procced off of killing somebody, but
yeah,
it's basically another passive effect, which is kind of weird that they write it as an active effect. But okay, whatever. That's cool. I guess because they have separate cooldowns is why they would do that, right? The active effect would maybe happen separately from the passive effect. Would be the only reason why I'd imagine that. So anyway, what do you think about this guy? Herofont Lazarus.
Really, really interesting champion. He's kind of like, what makes him interesting is because he does have like the Lysandra, so you can make him like I guess you could put accuracy on him and make him like your speed lead aura if you're looking for someone that can fill turn meter and also, crowd control the enemies, and you could use it in that aspect. So you can build him with accuracy and something like that. But he also has the A2 on the first form with the block debuff on or puts the block debuff on all allies, which is really, really fantastic. Decreases the duration of all buffs on enemies. The only downside to this ability here is after he does place the block debuff, I'm glad they do that before, but also decreasing the duration of all buffs on the enemies. If you do proc that and they happen to have the sheep on them, you're gonna get sheeped. So that's like the only downside to this ability here. But I guess like I wouldn't build this as like a support champion per se. I would build him as like a damage dealer because I did damage test him and he actually does some decent damage.
You like the second form. You like the second form. Yeah,
the second form is pretty nice. And like in case you guys didn't know, like just let's say for any mythical champion, you get locked out by Warlord, you get locked out by Yumiko because they went before you. You're still good because you can swap forms with him and you still have all your abilities ready to go, all your damage abilities, and you're just ready to just rock them. So that's kind of another cool thing to have him as like a mythical champion, right? Because you got that in your back pocket. But yeah, he's a pretty cool champion. I like him a lot.
That's interesting. I didn't actually know that about mythical. I don't have any mythical champions on my account just yet. So that's definitely a nice little bonus to have there. Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think his support kit's fantastic. Like, not only do you have that incredible speed aura, you're giving yourself increased attack and strength. And so kind of like, if you're going, it's interesting because you don't necessarily have to go first for him to be effective, right? You can go second, still have him do the turn meter stuff, just to ensure your team can go and it'll slow them down. But also you're giving yourself increased attack, which is incredibly valuable, and strength. And so if you're taking more hits, you can sustain that. But then also the buff, no, it's not a buff strip technically. It's decreasing duration, but like that is nasty. Dropping them 2 turns is pretty close to a buff strip.
I'm sorry. I made a complete mistake with that. Decreasing duration of the buffs on all enemies, you don't get sheep for that. That was a complete. Yeah, I must pick on that.
Not to mention with the sheep blessing, I know that's changing relatively soon, right? So that's even gonna, my guess is that is probably not going to be as much of an impact as it has been. Probably still will be, especially at high levels with max blessings, but probably won't be as much of an impact. But yeah, that does avoid that. And the block buffs he puts on happens after he attacks. So you're getting all the benefits. Even if he gets sheep, you're getting all the benefits first, which is pretty nice, I would say. Right? Yeah. And then you can still change forms if you need to, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah. So I have to go back on what I said earlier. So if you want to use him as a support champion with the accuracy and all that, you're actually good to go because he's actually not going to get sheep. So that's a really good thing. Because buff stripping and then decreasing duration is two totally different things. So this actually avoids getting sheeped, but the buff strip, like Madame Series or like a Chimera, that gets you sheeped. But this you're good to go. You're not going to get sheeped from this ability.
The other really nice part is because he gives himself that increased accuracy buff at the start of his turn. It's pretty nice that you don't have to build crazy accuracy for him to still be useful.
I completely botched this whole thing. so so from the part where I mentioned, or like when I give a reaction to saying like, oh, I made a mistake, maybe if you could cut from there, because like I completely forgot about this last portion here where he does place the block buffs on enemies, so he does get sheeped.
Placing that
There's a
block
lot
buffs,
going on in this kit. That's
there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on,
Yeah.
right? But placing that block buffs, that happens after everything else. That happens after his attack. It happens after he puts block debuff on himself and all of his allies. It happens after he does the decreased duration on the enemy buff. So even if he gets sheeped, like you mentioned, you can always change forms right after.
No. If you get sheeped, you can't change forms.
Oh, so even if you get sheep, then you're screwed. But otherwise, it's great though. But I mean, even with that, okay. So let's say that's the thing, right? I mean, if you're going to bring in a buff strip champion, that's always a risk you're going to run into, regardless, right? The fact that he can do not only the speed stuff, he's buffing your team with increased attack. So if you want to run a speed team, he's still going to be really good. He's going to slow the enemy down, going to speed you up. Gives himself increased accuracy, so the chances of these things not landing are basically nil if you build them pure support. On top of that, you have then after that you can still do the buff strip ability or the reduction of buffs and block buffs. And if you have them as that support, you've already done the two big things. If you're running a speed team, you should be winning by this point, right? It shouldn't matter if you get sheeped at this point. You should be, pretty close to done. So I think it's fine, honestly. I think it's still like a really good approach, and I think it's good that I think I was like showing the mistakes because it's like, yeah, we're human too. We make those same errors that everybody else watching does, and these things are complicated, right? There's a lot going on in these kits. But do you still? I mean, even recognizing all that, do you prefer first form or the second form?
Oh, definitely the second form. But where I would actually take them for myself personally, it would probably be live arena. Yeah.
A lot of flexibility in how you run a team in live arena with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can just control because it's not really about who wins the fastest or anything like that when it comes to live arena. You could take your sweet time, right? And just think about everything and just like drag it out as long as you have to, as long as you get the W, right? That's all that matters in live arena. But when it comes to regular arena, like, yes, he could be a solid nuker for sure, but as far as like, I guess if you're just farming gold 5 or something like that, then yeah, he's a fantastic nuker. But if you're trying to push plat arena like during plat reset, it's still too soon to say. But I mean, he's gonna get overshadowed by like a Georgid or something like that, because Georgid can ignore Stone Skin and still do everything pretty much he's doing here, aside from the passive. That's really sweet. But yeah, I mean, he's still a fantastic champion for sure.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, we can definitely see he does a lot of damage on his second form, and he's definitely really good support on his first form. My guess is if you guys have him, you're going to be able to find a way to utilize him. I actually think that first form, the support form, could be pretty fantastic for things like Hydra as well. I think that actually might be a really underrated spot where he could be very, very effective. The second form as well, quite frankly, he does so much damage, ignores defense, get bonuses. Could be a really strong damage dealer on that approach for PvE content wise. But we're going to dive into more deeply. I don't want to spend too much time here on this one guy because we're going to dive in more on Smiley's channel. So guys, I'll have that video linked down below in the pinned comment description. I'll have his channel linked down there as well. So make sure to go check that out after this. But yeah, let's move on to the other mythical champion, Aidus the Hive Lord. Now, I looked at his kit and I was kind of impressed by it. I thought there were some really cool things going on in here, but as always, multipliers matter, especially when it comes to damage dealing champions. So I just want to take a quick look at his kit, right? Perfect Veil on an ally with the highest attack on his A1. That can be great to like help somebody on your team. I'm not sure if he'll cast that on himself, but that might be an option. A2, attacks all enemies before attacking, increase attack on all allies. That's a really nice ability. I do love an AoE 8 increased attack. One of those things that I don't ever build into my teams, but every time I put it in, I'm always like, oh god, this is so effective. Like, it makes such a big difference in the damage that you do. And then increases the duration of all enemy debuffs, right? So debuff extension. And then of course you got an HP burn on the A3. It'll either activate every HP burn, or if they're not an HP burn, places an HP burn, which is really nice. And then his passive ability, each time the champion places an HP burn, decreases the target's defense by 3% up to 30%. So that's a really nice little passive ability. And then for each HP burn debuff on the enemy increases champion's crit damage by 10%. That goes up to 100% for things like Spider, I would imagine. And whenever an enemy HP burn debuff activates, increases champion's attack by 5% up to 50%. That resets each round. So, you're reducing the enemy's defense, you're increasing your own attack. Those are huge passive abilities. We see that already in champions like Xena, in champions like Ninja, or Varl the Destroyer, right? So those are already really nice abilities. Plus he's got increased attack buffs he's giving, and everything's attack based, and he's placing those HP burns. So I feel like there's a lot of utility here with Aphidus in PvE content without having tested them. Obviously the multipliers matter. And then when you flip forms, I actually want to start with the passive here because I think this is what brings the whole kit together. Is his defense increases by 1 point for every 2 point of attack. So if you can build him with 6,000 attack and 1,000 defense, his defense is actually going to be 4,000 when he's in his alternate form. It's pretty amazing, right? Also, when his attack has a 100% chance of placing a weakened debuff and a 35% chance of placing a stun debuff on the attacker for 1 turn, which is pretty nice little passive ability. His A1 places increased accuracy on an ally with the lowest accuracy. His A2 is an AoE with a stun for 1 turn. Just a stun. There's no resist chance. There's no percentage chance. AoE stun, which is awesome. Continues heal on all allies if no stuns were placed. And then provoke with the A3 with a strengthen buff and increased defense buff. Strengthen on him and increased defense on everybody. I mean, his alternate form seems like a really awesome CC support style champion where you're stunning the enemy, you're provoking the enemy, and even when you're getting attacked, you're stunning the enemy. There's a lot in that I like. And what's great is because of that passive that turns attack into defense, you can still build him as a damage dealer in his other form, and it's not going to hurt his chances to be the tank for your team. What's your impression of this guy? Because it's kind of an interesting kit. I've never seen a champion quite like that can really be built for attack and then become an amazing defensive style champion as well.
Okay, so at first glance, when I looked at him, I wasn't too impressed. From a standpoint of just where can I use him on right now on my own account.
Sure.
But as just one thing that did pop out for me is let's say you are an early game player, mid game player, or you happen to pull this champion, right? Mm-hmm. One thing that's really cool is he doesn't need any books for his A3 on his first form, because that HP burn, it'll just there's no percentage where you need to book it to happen. So it's just it's automatic, I guess.
And it's already on a 3-turn cooldown too.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of neat.
That's pretty awesome, actually. I hadn't thought all of his skills are already cooled down. You don't need any books for that.
Right.
That's a really good point. Getting an AoE HP burn early on is so clutch for your teams.
Yeah, I think that's something that stuck out to me. As far as his A2 or his second form goes, I think it is pretty neat that he can actually. So let's say you build him with a lot of attack, and then you could just turn that into defense. So I have to share what we talked about earlier when I said I did test him. Yeah. As far as his damage goes, okay, guys, he's not going to be your damage dealer, right? I'm sorry. I'm sorry I had to break it to you, but I built him in a lot, massive amount of attack, massive amount of crit damage, and he was flinging wet noodles. All right, I got to be real. but that 8,000 attack I had on him, and mind you, he's not empowered, he has no ascensions, not awakened, nothing, right? So just that's his, that's the base stats basically when he's maxed out. That 8,000 attack I had on him, 4,000 of that goes to his defense when he's in his second form. So that shifts into defense, right? So I think one thing that could have been cool as far as his second form goes is if all his abilities actually were based off of your attack. Is that weird? Because you already have the attack, and then the defense is just extra. But I mean, I guess it's no, maybe not. I don't know. It's just maybe I'm just theory crafting a little too much or something.
No, I think there's something, one of the things early on in this game, years ago now, we don't see it very much anymore, but there was definitely a thing where, they would have like, defensive champions that still use attack for their damage stat, right? It was very frustrating to kind of go with that because you're like, oh, I have to build multiple things. What's really great about this champion is obviously converting that attack into defense. And I think that is a great solution to that kind of multi-ability champion that you want to have, right? Or multi, stat champion. But I kind of dig what you're saying. It's like, well, can I still use attack for the damage? Could I still use that as the basis for the damage? And now what I'm doing is I'm converting that attack into HP or into defense for survivability, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is definitely a very interesting approach to things that I would love to see. Now, obviously, that's not the case here, but that is definitely something that I think would be cool in the future, or would have been cool on this champion. Obviously, one of the big factors for him is he gives himself an increased defense buff. So that's really going to, obviously ramp up what he can do in these forms. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So I guess my question is, how would you, without, having done extensive testing on him, just doing a little damage testing, where would you be inclined to utilize him? What are the areas that you'd be looking at and going, okay, this is where I think this champion would be a really good addition for my team?
I mean, I guess from a general
maybe not a great addition for your teams, but like, where would you see him being used for other people's team? For my team, where would you put him in my team? I guess.
I mean, I guess like the HP burn is just from a general sense. Like we already mentioned earlier about the HP burn, that he doesn't need any percentage. So right off the bat, like Spider, right, anywhere where you can utilize the HP burn for AoE, that's really great. But for second form, I think with the provoke, I mean, that's really good for like Magnar Dragon, like the stun. I mean, he's got a nice CC kit that's amazing for, like, he's just like a beast for faction wars. I mean,
that goes without saying.
Really beast there. And yeah, I mean, pretty interesting. That's pretty much all I could really think of at this point. I don't know, where would you use him? I guess he looks really cool though. That second form looks so cool. Dude, we haven't had a champion that looks like this.
It's like freaking Scarab Beetle, man. Blue Beetle over here. I think that really cool. Freaking awesome for sure. For me, I think you mentioned it with that HP burn. That was a really great catch on that, not needing any books for it. When you do book him, you're starting to ignore defense, so you even need even less accuracy to really activate him. But I think obviously the HP burn is a natural fit. I think that just goes without saying. Being able to utilize that, giving increased attack and increasing duration of debuffs. I think that you're going to build this champion as a, how would I use it? Maybe like a Thalesia almost, right? Not a strong damage dealer. Thalesia can hit decently hard. I would like to see the multipliers on Aphidus before I would fully condemn them on their damage abilities. But, assuming that, but I mean, you've done some testing. I haven't. I can only assume that what you're saying is spot on. And I have no reason to doubt that. So if the numbers are bad, if not going to be dealing damage, then I'd be looking at just a high accuracy type of build and survivability, right? So I'm like, let's see, can I get these HP burns out? And then once I get these HP burns out, right, that's kind of the only thing I'm looking for in that form, really. After that, I'm scarabing it up. I'm just going scarab all day, every day, and just trying to CC the enemies. And I think this is really where the primary focus comes in. I wish the scarab form was the form we started in. A lot of ways, because I think that is the best usage, right? I mean, we're talking about AoE provoke, and it's, by the way, it places it, not an attack, which is actually like a really big thing for stuff like Hydra, the natural thing. I don't know, but one turn provoke is what you're looking for in Hydra, but like the point is though, like you can really avoid a lot of issues with that. The AoE stun is really nice. Like everything, even the passive, where when he gets hit, he has a chance of placing stun, is kind of phenomenal, really, when it comes right down to it. So I think the best spot you're going to see Aphidus is in Doom Tower progression, especially the high levels on hard, where you really have a hard time keeping the teams at bay. I think he's going to be phenomenal for that. But Outside of that, obviously you can see some usage in Spider. You could see some usage in things like Hydra, though I don't think that's going to be a primary spot. The Form 1 actually might be, well, I mean, it could probably be good in a pinch for things like Clan Boss or Hydra, but probably not like, ideal either. Can't hit hard. But yeah, I think this one's probably more of a miss than a hit if the multipliers aren't good. Like if this form doesn't do damage, it's pretty lackluster, right?
Yeah,
if you're not
pretty.
I like the HP burn activation. That's actually really great. So again, this could be great for Spider. But like, if we're not extending the duration with that A1, if we're not, extending the duration with the A2, actually, there's a lot of HP burn stuff going on in this kit. You're placing it for 2 turns, extending it for 1 turn. Everything's on a 3-turn cooldown. A lot of HP burn stuff going on in that first form. Actually, could be kind of interesting.
I kind of wish he had another ability that also placed the HP burn. Maybe like his A1 or A2 or something.
I
just
would
extra
like to
HP burn.
I would like to see the A1 extend.
Yeah, because then the A2, then he can just pop into it or extend with the A2 or whatever. Kind of like another Sisia or like another Theodore or something like that, right?
Yeah. I would imagine though we can probably come up with some pretty fun shenanigans with this guy.
Yeah.
Like an AoE HP burn activation on a 3-turn cooldown. That doesn't exist in the game. Like that's I think maybe outside of Theodore. It doesn't really exist, and that would be pretty good to see. But not bad, champ, not bad. We'll save the fusion for last year. Let's move on to Frybuck Colwyn, the rare champion being introduced for the Sylvan Watchers. I think looks amazing, and I love the name Frybuck. I'm all in. I'm all in on Frybuck. I think that's phenomenal.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, look at that. Look at that helmet. I want that helmet.
Of course you do.
I'm just gonna get elk horns for my hat. I think is my next move. Super cool. Anyway, let's see. A1 increase accuracy on the champion for 2 turn. Kind of nice that he puts it on himself. Actually, I think that's a pretty nice little ability. A2 is a stun, single target, but 50% chance when booked on a 3-turn cooldown. And then A3, AoE, and before attacking places, increase defense on all allies. It's a defensive based champion, so that helps. This book's still 4-turn cooldown. Only needs 11 books for a rare champion. That's extremely low. I don't know. Interesting. I don't know that he really has a clear place in this game, but that's not bad for a rare champion. Sylvan Watchers, right? You got increased accuracy buff. You've got a stun. So you don't have to build them crazy accuracy, and you can still be fairly useful to getting that stun out there.
I mean, just based off of the kit alone here, I can tell you this person is not a damage dealer.
Yeah.
There's no additional damage you can get from the AoE attack. Like there's only cooldown reduction on there.
There's a oh yeah, no, that's on AoE. Oh yeah, the AoE. Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yeah, not great. Fair. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, okay, cool. So pretty much of a vaulty and useless rare champion, right?
Chicken, yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Okay.
Sweet chicken. All right, moving on. Ugar the Wormeater. All right, this guy, I think there's a little debate. How is this guy going to be used? What's he going to be good for? He has kind of an interesting kit that I think can lend people to building in multiple different ways, or at least thinking that you should build in multiple different ways. So I kind of want to get your take on how this fusion champion is supposed to go, whether people should be fusing him or not. Like I said, I haven't tested him yet. I can't say for myself, whether you should or not, but I think there are some interesting things going on in this kit. A1 is one of the best A1s I've seen, right? I mean, talk about steal a buff and put a block buff out there. That's just 100% chance. So as long as you have the accuracy, that's going to land. I think that's pretty fantastic for an A1 ability. A2 is an AoE. It's got a buff removal, 100% chance when booked, and then has and then places a weaken debuff for 2 turns. Again, really nice utility on that. A3, increase accuracy on all allies, increase defense on all allies whose defense is higher than or equal to their attack, or an increased attack on all allies whose attack is higher than their defense. Those are really strong buffs. That makes your damage dealers better, makes your debuffers better. There's kind of nothing to be angry about in that. This book's down to a 3-turn cooldown. They all do. It only 10 books, I believe, total, which is on par. And then passive ability, that's the 11th book. Whenever an enemy is revived, instantly activates Earth Puncture, which is that A2 that strips buffs, places block buffs on the enemy. If I'm not mistaken, it's just buff, strip, and weaken. That's the one it is. But this activates every time someone gets revived, and if the reviver is Lizard Man, then it can't be resisted. And it's only activated when someone is actually revived. Yeah. This book's still a 1-turn cooldown, so that means basically every time he takes a turn, that's going to block somebody's, or going to mess up somebody's revive ability. I don't know.
Too.
I don't know how good this guy is. Part of me's like, it's kind of a mediocre kit. He's got a buff strip, cool. He places some nice buffs on your team, but there's no turn meter boost. So I'm like, how effective is that going to be? And yet, that passive ability is interesting because it's such a slow go second meta, such a reviver heavy defense meta. Maybe that's more useful than I'm giving it credit for. But I'm interested to hear what you think about that, honestly, because you're more of an, I feel like this is an arena champion. First off, I feel like that's very clear. And if that's the case, you're more of an arena expert than I am. Do you see this champion actually having an ability to be used? Or is this basically a straight to vault kind of thing situation?
So as far as arena goes, this is going to be a no-go. That A2 alone, I mean, you're gonna get shoot.
Wait, before we dive in too deep.
Okay.
There's 2 distinct levels in arena. There's platinum, which you compete at, and then there's everything else, which I compete at. Right. So is this, when you say it's a no-go, are you talking about all levels, or are you talking about plat?
Well, I feel like even like an average player that's just maybe doing gold 5 arena per se, I feel like they'll still have at least 1 star on their arena champions, right? Wouldn't you say? Maybe like an average player would have at least 1 star on their champions.
I don't know about all your champions, but some of them for sure. Yeah.
So let's say your champ. Well, the gold 5 arena teams I've seen, it's like weird because I have a free to play, or I have another alt account that was a huge spender account, and it's like a higher player power, and like it's in bronze 1, but I'm still seeing like gold 5 like plat teams, which is weird. So I don't really know how to gauge it, but either way, I think just a general, I guess, view of it. If like, let's say a defense does have a couple champions with 1 star, like the polymorph, right? The sheep.
Sure.
This is not going to work here. It's not going to be that great. I rather just have someone, and like, it's like you said earlier, that was something that jumped out to me too. That A3, if that had like a increase, like, I don't know, speed or like a fill turn meter boost along with that, then I could see that being more utilized. But it feels kind of bland a little bit. It feels like something is missing there. But for me, I didn't really see this as an arena champion. I saw this more of like in Iron Twins, maybe like somewhere like something like there, or even like, because the increased accuracy 50%, like that's pretty huge for people that can't do that reach certain accuracy for like higher bosses, right? So maybe even like Hydra boss, maybe, I don't know,
or
like
one of the hard level dungeons or something like that to like make your champions be able to get to the numbers they need. I could see that.
Yeah, I saw like maybe it has a niche there, but overall, I think this champion is a bit underwhelming. I'm not gonna lie, but either way, I still say go for, if you have the resource to go for a champion and you can do it, then do it. Always do it.
The legendary,
yeah. So that's pretty much all I can say.
That's fair. Well, I do know, I feel obligated to mention this every time, but obviously they're making changes to polymorph. So right now, I know polymorph has such a disproportionate effect on things, but let's assume for an instant that it stops having that kind of effect, right? Maybe it's, I don't think it's going anywhere, but maybe it's nowhere near as impactful as it is right now, or it's something we don't have to consider actively anymore. If that's the case, how do we feel about this guy? Does that change your opinion to all of a sudden you go, well, you know what, I can see using him in arena? because the one thing I will say is like one of the things I see is I look at this A2, it's a buff strip and a weaken. It's kind of a weaker version of Madame Saris, right? That's how I see that, right? Nothing else really happening. But then I look at that A3 and I go, well, we're getting some, potentially really impactful buffs on our team. Now, agreed, I think there are better options for this, but the idea that he's going to increase your defense or your attack, depending on what's higher, can mean that he can make your protection champions better and your damage dealers stronger, or both really at the same time, right? Like if you bring in, even like, let's say you go second, right? I know. I'm trying to find the silver lining here with this. Okay. So let's say you go second, right? You've got your UDK, you've got your, like I run like UDK, Pythion, Necrit, and then I run a damage dealer, like sometimes Gorgid, sometimes Candrafon. But in that situation, all my support champions are going to be tougher, and everybody's going to be able to land their debuffs a lot easier. So I can actually build my UDK with resistance and a little bit of accuracy, and maybe he'll land his True Fear. And my damage dealer, Gorgid or or Candy, they're both going to hit harder now because they now have increased attack on them. Am I smoking too much? Am I not?
No.
Am I daydreaming a little bit here? Am I drinking the Kool-Aid? Like, is this a reasonable way to try to utilize this guy?
Yeah, if what you said earlier, if that polymorph works differently and like they do nerf it or rework it or whatever, then yeah, you could totally use it in that aspect. And the reason why I laughed earlier and why I put my head down is because I was just this champion reminded me of someone's kit so much. So I looked around to see other champions because I thought I knew what champion it was. So I went to it. So you want to go to it with me real quick? Sure. Go to your index, and then go to Dark Elves, and then go to Korean, the Doom Tower champion. Oh, and then look at the kits.
It's identical. I know.
Yeah,
it's identical. Remove buffs. The weaken. That part's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Exactly the same. A1's almost identical too. Now that you pointed out. Good call. All right. Fair enough. Yeah. But I think the one, obviously the big thing is, I guess this is the other part of it, right? Like I'm trying to figure out how do we utilize this active kit in our team. But the big thing is his passive. This is the thing that's really supposed to make him worth using, right? Is that he's going to activate that A2 and it doesn't affect the cooldown, right? It can be on cooldown, it'll activate. It can be off cooldown, it'll activate, and you'll still have it available to be able to use. He's not a strong damage dealer from everything I hear and can tell. So it's not going to be something where he's going to be able to put back into the earth the people that get revived, and it doesn't work on like things like Revive on Death, right? So it's not going to help with, Cardiel, for example. But is this something that you think can actually have a place in here and be important enough to get some usage out of?
Yeah, I think in Arena it could be more interesting if the polymorph works completely different, right? The sheep,
right?
Because like let's say that sheep changes, right? That changes the entire Arena landscape. Because now Madame Saris is back in the picture. Champions like this with the remove buffs that can potentially constantly do it with the Earth Shatter, Earth Puncture, like that's triggering. It makes it more interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Perfect. I guess that would put back on the table champions that do single target damage too, right? So champions like obviously Rotos is still being used actively, but I think it would make them even stronger because I think especially if you can bring in Urgir, what you're almost hoping to kill these champions, you're almost hoping for them to be revived because then it's just putting those skills on cooldown and giving you the time to actually put them back in the ground where they came from. And if Ugir's activating that skill, constantly stripping those buffs, like I would imagine that Ugir would pair really well with Xena when you're going against Duchess teams, right? Because Duchess revives, puts 8 buffs out, Xena goes interrupt. Ugar activates, strips everything. Then Xena comes in and, can hopefully do a little cleanup action for you and actually, hit these people back again. I think there's some interesting potential with that kind of a setup, right?
Yeah, that's some interesting theory crafting. I like it.
Oh, thank you. Okay, good. When somebody says that's interesting, there's often that's more of a, I feel like often that's a little bit more sarcastic than it is genuine, but I appreciate you clarifying that for me. I mean, I suppose that's very, there's a lot of potential that needs to go into that, like a lot of caveats that are happening there. For sure. Okay. Well, I mean, that's good. It's good to hear that. Well, cool. All right. Well, look, we've gone through all 4 of the new champions here. Did you have anything you wanted to add on any of them?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. All right. Well, we've been talking for a long time. I'm sure the people out there are tired of hearing us babble on and on about these guys. Definitely tired of hearing my theory crafting for Arena because I know what I'm doing. Yeah. So if you guys want to hear some real good theory crafting, some quality analysis of how to use these champions, we're going to go on Smiley's channel and we're going to talk about Herofont Lazarus and maybe other things. You never know where these conversations go. So make sure to come by. I'll have that at the end of the video if you want to just click that little thumbnail that pops up. Otherwise, you can click the link in the pinned comment and or description of this video where I'll have his linked. So go check it out. Go subscribe to this guy. He's, nicest guy in Raid. No reason not to. It's not good content. It's
too much.
It's worth doing.
Kind words. Thank you.
Never, good sir. Never. All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Till next we meet on the Deadwood Jedi.